I mean, I've been yapping about him already, so I'll talk about Bjorkstrand and Shane. Um, this was going to be an interesting year to me for Oliver Bjorkstrand because as a I don't know if it's sicko behavior, but anytime someone signs a contract with this team or an extension, I did it after the Larson extension. I did it after the Decord extension. I like to go on now Puckpedia and look at who's next, right? What player, could earn a contract, who could you move, who's coming up, and depending on how things go, it was interesting to look at an Oliver Bjorkstrand just because, you got him as effectively a cap casualty when Columbus signed Johnny Gaudreau. May he rest in peace. He had a solid year in year two, year three. I think everyone just kind of sucked generally. That was just a bad year. Um, and it was really interesting when he got healthy scratched, because it didn't look like he was bad per se, but he wasn't maybe performing at a top six level. And so from that aspect, I understand, but he is a guy who's making $5.4 million a year. Um, and you'd like to see that performance. And he wasn't really doing much of that, not really performing in a top six role. He gets benched. And then we look at my lovely NHL website. I love when it works. What a crazy concept. Since that first San Jose game, he leads the team in points. He leads the team in goals. He's a more than a point per game player. Um, the accountant, the accountant, he looks like the maestro that we got to know, you know, um, and I don't need him to be, I'd love him to be a 40 goal scorer. I don't need him to continue this pace all the time, but it certainly helps, right? And that's been electric to see. And Shane Wright, same thing. Second leading point getter since that point in time, since November 29th. Five goals right behind Bjorkstrand. Um, it's really encouraging to see that from Shane Wright because, obviously since Montreal fans are kind of weird, they always like to dunk on Shane if, he so much as breathes in a negative connotation. Um, so, and Shane could do anything, and there's just someone on Twitter that just is slough better, and I'm like, I don't care. I really don't care. Um, it's been great to see this, from both of those guys because obviously there was supposed to be a lot of hope in this franchise for this year. You signed two guys who have won cups, who have winning capability. You want to improve the offensive game. They didn't do that so much in the first few months, but you're seeing that happen over this stretch lately, and you're seeing it come from both of those guys, yeah, which is nice to see. It's not all Jared McCann. And even in this stretch, Jared McCann hasn't, you know, I'd like to see it improve, but he hasn't produced a lot. Um, Let me see, where can I find him? Yeah, he's the 11th. He's only got 4 points, in this month of since the 29th, which isn't great. I would like to see him turn up a little bit better, but my point being your best forward isn't having to do, so much of carrying the load. So, um, Jade, what have you thought, whether it's uh, who are your top performers, of this strength since the month of December began, whether it's, talking about those guys or someone else who's maybe stood out to you, and then Sylvia will go to you.
He hasn't done a whole lot like point wise, but Stevenson has kind of stood out to me a little bit. I was trying to find where I saw somebody the other day say that he wasn't even a top like 400 or something player, and I looked it up. He was like at least top 100, maybe top 50. I can't remember. I can't find the screenshot anymore. But anyways, I was trying to find that just now. Stevenson has always kind of stood out to me. Um, he, I don't know, the way that he moves the puck kind of like entrances, not the right word, but it like kind of it takes your attention a little bit, if that makes sense. Like when Stevie has the puck, it's more of like okay, now I'm watching the Stevie show. What is he going to do next? Who's he passing it to? What's going to be the next move following this? And um, that's something that I saw when he was with Vegas. Same kind of with Monty, honestly, Montour, where it's I'm seeing them with the puck and then I'm trying to figure out what what's their next move going to be. Sometimes I can kind of predict where it's going to go. Sometimes I can't. But they have this month specifically so far, they've kind of been two of my like more standout players. And again, not necessarily like point scoring, but more of just puck handling and their performance in general.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the Brandon Montour, especially like saying that you don't know what he's going to do, I think is an incredibly good description
I
of
was,
Brandon Montour's show.
yeah, I was watching when Stanley Cup finals last year, when I would watch him with the puck, I was like, I just don't know what this guy is going to do. And then he would blow me away. I watched most of the Stanley Cup finals in a bar down the road from my old house, but with a bunch of old hockey fans. And it was always so entertaining. Everybody was kind of like predicting what's going to happen next. Nobody knows what's going on next. And then he would just blow everyone away. So I'm
I
seeing
think
that now too.
mhm. I think on the similar path, look, I know the Brandon Tanev haters in this world are many. I am not one of them. I Brandon Tanev has been kind of a standout player for me, which I know is like a really weird thing to say because we have not actually seen a lot from him. But considering how bad, I don't think bad's the correct word, how mid to bad the penalty kill has been for the Kraken.
Hmm.
I think I was looking at a map the other day. I think Brandon Tanev is the only player on the Kraken who's like hitting league averages on the penalty kill. And obviously, you know, I'm a big fan of that chaos line with like Yanni Gord when he's like in the lineup. So I pay a lot of attention to my guys. So like watching Brandon Tanev um be able to balance like that defensive offensive role when we do have the penalty kill has been awesome to watch. He's kind of my standout guy. And a little like swaying to the side, I also really want to like take this time to give a shout out to Coach Dan Bylsma for being able to recognize that like, and I as a long time like Penguins fan, I saw this a lot when I was like younger, obviously was not super paying attention, but he is really good at knowing when the players off the ice need to come off the ice. And that's where we saw like those scratches. That's why the Kraken are working so well right now, because Bylsman's like a guy who is willing and able to take those chances to scratch players that, you know, are supposed to be key players, are supposed to be good players, even if they're not players who are having like scoring droughts, like you were just saying. Bjorkstrand, you know, was still technically putting up plays. He was still technically putting up like goals, but he did need to be scratched that one time to kind of like come to do a full reset. And you do not get that with a lot of coaches in the NHL where they just like intrinsically understand that the game is life. The game is a whole thing and you have to be able to connect with your players as like through the whole thing. So those are my two standouts.
I have something to kind of it's Flyers, not Penguins, but I've seen a lot of that this year. Like where there's been a couple times in a group chat that I'm in where we're mostly Flyers fans, and I'm like, I feel like Bylsma is kind of being Tortorella right now, where it's like you're scratching somebody that's typically playing pretty well and is regularly helping or scoring points or helping to get points or whatever, and then scratching them anyway because they're not performing to his standard. So similar, but different side of Pennsylvania. So I totally get what you're saying, where I've had that same train of thought.
Yeah, you really have to like obviously I've never been a coach in my life except for my little brother's 10U and I'm really I'm not allowed on the bench anymore. Um, but like you really have to be able to recognize that sometimes your players really do need to like that kick in the ass kind of thing. Not
Hmm.
to cuss on your podcast, Charles. But like I think that's something that Bylsma does really well is that he is able to recognize when like a player's just not giving their full 100. And if their full 100 can come, you know, if they're scratched 1 to 3 games, then he's
Hmm.
going to do that. He's going to take the chance. And I think that's like you said, it's like something, you know, they're doing that in Philly, but like not a lot of coaches are willing to do that if it means
Exactly.
losing points, if it means like losing a game, especially like during Thanksgiving, December,
Hmm.
where the standings are kind of locking in. So being able to see that in our coach first year, with a team again that's just barely coming together, they're barely finding themselves, has been awesome to watch.
Yep. The like not being afraid to make a change in a roster if it means bettering the team in the long term.
Mhm.
Even if it's, yeah, like you said, losing a couple games, losing a couple points, whatever. Is it going to be better in the long term? Yes. Okay, cool. We're doing it.
I want to touch on a couple guys that you guys mentioned. With Stevie, like I'm not gonna mention specifics because I don't want to, and I don't like to do that. Um, but there's one like fan podcast where one of the guys was super adamantly against Stevenson. And don't get me wrong, we all know that that contract was an overpay. You have to do that in free agency a lot of the times if you're going to bring guys, to a franchise that's typically not a winner historically or isn't a great market, weather-wise. You're going to have to do that. It happens all the time in different sports. Um, what was talked about often when he was signed was his passing and his skating ability, and those have been essentially what he's brought. He's
Yep.
he's a leader, with the assist numbers. His assist numbers, with the deeper statistics are really high. And after the Boston game, I know that um, I don't remember who it was specifically, but someone said that. Oh, I know. I think Piper was talking about it. Piper Shaw was saying that when asked about Chandler's skating, and then Bilesma said it looks like he's gliding half the time, just because of how effortless it is. So, you know, as much of a problem that contract will present, down the future and how not great it is, you just like with the Grubauer contract, you have to grow up to an extent and just deal with it. You're looking at the now. We're looking at this season, and he's
Hmm.
providing you distribution. You'd like to see. That's why when he's been on a line with Andre Burakovsky, I had hoped that it would unlock more of a skating ability. Not skating, more of Berkey's shot because his shot is great. Like we've seen his shot, we've seen what his shot can be. We've seen the skill from Andre Burakovsky. Those aren't questions. It's just when he can bring those out. Like even on Money Puck, his shot talent percentage is like second on this team behind Daniel Sprong, which is ironic. It's funny to me. Um, but yeah, I mean, he's been playing on a line with Jared McCann and Andre Burakovsky, and those are two guys who have great shots, right? So, I like to see that distribution um, out and effective. With Brandon Tanev, I'll be fully honest, and both of these two can attest to it, and they'll probably nod. Like, I imagine the guy's going to get traded. I
Yeah.
do. Just because of the contract and, because of where he plays usually in the bottom six role. But again, growing up and looking outside of the contract, he's always been, I mean, you could probably argue he's always been this team's best penalty killer since he's been here. The
Hmm.
amount of times that and even blocking shots, there have been a few times over this homestand where he blocks a shot and he'll limp off the ice. Doesn't matter. He'll still take his next shift. He's like it's really funny because again, both of these two will attest to it. I was like, hey, if we're gonna deal with this roster crunch, this salary cap crunch, you gotta move him and if it was like, oh, what about Yanni Gord? He's making $5 million is essentially your 4C. And I understand that, but I had been told that we were getting calls on Yanni and they were saying no. So I was like, well, I'm gonna keep the guy. Obviously, with Vince Dunn going on LTIR at the time, and then Jordan Eberle going on LTIR, you haven't had to deal with that for the time being, and you won't need to deal with it for a while. Unfortunately, I hope Ebbs is okay. I know a pelvis surgery is very brutal. I can only imagine.
I
But
heard that he was
he's
driving yesterday. So,
oh, there you go. It's just so funny to think about how after the Islanders game, I saw him on crutches. That's when I knew something was wrong. I was the
hmm.
only one there in the tunnel, and it's me and him, and he's on crutches. I'm like, this isn't good. Um, but then the second funny thing was seeing after Lauren, his wife, gave birth, he's the one sitting down with the baby.
Yep.
You did not give birth? I don't think he did.
You don't know that. You don't know that.
I wasn't
Insider
there.
information.
Um, but no, all this to say, the scoring touch that he like the 2 goals in that game against Vegas, to win at home. and then the kind of scoring touch he's had. Uh, I've been frustrated with Brandon because of the money he's making and the line he's typically been playing a bottom six role, right? He's always been effective, as a penalty killer. His effort's always been there. Those have never been questions for me. Um, and the offensive performance, obviously, this is offense wins games, all that. Well, and not offense wins games. That's not the saying. This team has been struggling for offense largely in 3 out of the 4 years that they've existed, right? Year two, the depth scoring was incredible. Um, and he's been pretty solid offensively this year. I mean, again, I don't think any one of us would say great, but he's a guy that will work hard. He will go to the hard areas. He will play well in the penalty kill. He's had a good year. So,
He's the consistency that you're looking for on an on inconsistent team. And I think
that,
I agree. I will admit, I know I will have to go to New Jersey. I know he will get traded. But I think when we have a team that is up and down all of the time, where we have players who are falling asleep some days, and then, other days they're like, they just drank a Diet Pepsi or whatever. Like with Brandon Tanev, we have that consistency. He's somebody who's willing to put his body in front of pucks.
Hmm.
Um, where we really haven't seen that. I think again goes back to identity. We really haven't seen that from the Kraken. Like we haven't seen a Kraken team who is willing to fight for their teammates. There was that whole situation with, I think it was like Ty Carte a
mm,
few games ago, where like he was, getting picked on. Everybody just kind of skated away. We don't get that with Brandon Tanev. Brandon Tanev, he's always on turbo mode. It's the reason we call him that. Like he's just always on, and he's always willing to play the game because it's the game and not because, it's his job kind of thing.
no,
Hmm.
that makes sense. And I think having that no you know what you're gonna get with Brandon Tanev typically,
Mhm.
right? And you really can't say that about that many players. Like, I mean, I could go down the roster list, right? At least, since it's Tanev, we'll go in the forward department, right? Like, I know what I'm gonna get from Jared McCann, Brandon Tanev, Yanni Gord. At this stage of his career, I understand what I'm getting from Yanni Gord. Um, Jaden Schwartz typically, but that's yeah. Well, and maybe Shane recently, but it's not a big list, you know. So yeah, I will say that, and then I talked about Shane and Oliver, but when Sylvia brought him up, and I would be remiss to not use the opportunity to talk about Brandon Montour, because that guy, I mean, he's been everything. I know it was a lot less than what it was for Stevie, but there was some chatter about his contract, and I'm like, at some point, at sometimes I'm wondering if he's getting paid enough. Like, and this was something else that Sylvia and I were talking about. I looked at his hockey stat card. He's got a 1.5 offensive rating in the 81st percentile there. He's in the 94th percentile defensively. There have been so many instances where one of your goalies will have his ass out and the puck is in the crease, and Brendan Montour comes to save the day and will come and get the puck out of there in that instance, and that includes jumping on the puck. Like, even in that regard, yes, you give up a penalty shot, but I'd rather give your goalie an opportunity with the penalty shot than let the puck cross the plane, right? So, I mean, it's just been a lot of fun to watch Brandon Montour play, come to the rink every day, just be a fun presence on this team.
Hmm.
Um, you've got a guy that's a winner. Obviously there are Stanley Cup champions on this team, but adding someone that's so, and Allison Lucan used this word dynamic. Dynamic is such a great word for Brandon Montour. It's been so much fun to see the way that he plays the game, and that was a I don't like to do it because obviously there are the later years of that contract, but I don't know how many like slam dunk transactions Ron Francis has made with this franchise. That's one of them. I'm saying that now, obviously, in year one of the contract, but I mean, it's been remarkable to watch Brandon Montour play every night. It's always really fun to see what 62 will get into. So, we'll look ahead.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Jen.
Hey. Where are you going to watch all those Kraken away games?
Kraken away games, making a push. I was thinking of coming here just because Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports, only if that's okay with you.
I mean, I love that idea. Hope to see you here.
Hello there, everybody. Charles Hamaker here with Circling Seattle Sports. I'm joined by Jen Barnes of Rough and Tumble that we happen to be at right now.
Yeah.
Jen, why don't you talk to me a little bit about what we're announcing today, which is our partnership.
I'm so excited about this. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I think all of us here at Rough and Tumble are big fans of what you and your team at Circling Seattle Sports does. And so, I know you know this, but when you came to me with this idea, it just seemed pretty natural. And it's not just me. I think a lot of people in the sports community in Seattle also really respect you and your team. So it's exciting to kind of see these two things melding together, and we're really excited to start implementing some of the things and then hopefully seeing you guys a little bit more often.
Yeah, and so with what Jen says about seeing us more often, we've got a few things in the works, but you'll see watch parties here. We'd like to do a few different of our community drives, which you'll hear about here in a little bit from now. We've got to make our announcements one at a time. I can't drop everything.
Not everything
right?
all at once.
But this has been a home for a lot of our team, whether it's myself, our friend, our photographer Liz is behind the camera. Liz is here often, so our team has kind of adopted this place kind of like our own since I saw you at our soft launch. So, it's been great to have that support. In a lot of ways, and part of the reason I wanted to do this was the Rough and Tumble embodies a lot of what Circling Seattle Sports wants to do. Obviously with women's sports, with the storm and the rain, but just being, having the game on, every game on.
Yep.
How much of that, did you see a line kind of even before this idea was mentioned when I first met you?
I think it's always felt like that. I mean, you and your team were here on opening night, and you just feel like you're part of the space, so it felt like really natural. And the fact that you actually cover all of the sports really makes your group stand out. So you are always covering all the rain games, all the storm games. You'd have women's softball, you'd have women's basketball, you'd have women's hockey. We love it. So all of those things, and obviously passionate M's fans, passionate Hawks fans, and passionate Kraken and Sounders fans. So really, from our perspective, those two things meshed really well.
So, you heard it from Jen herself, but this will be our home for all of these events, whether it's you can't make it to these games at home, we're always going to direct you to Rough and Tumble, and obviously the games on the road as well. All these, we're talking about the rain, they've got their schedule out finally, but this will be our home for that.
Great.
The storm games on the road, this is our home.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes.
I love it.
And when I mentioned it to Jen when I first had this idea come up, I had this idea come up wearing a pink wig.
Yes, you did.
Ahead of Megan Rapinoe's final regular season home game for the Reign this past year.
Yeah.
I told her it's because I wanted this to feel genuine.
Yep.
I wanted a connection to feel genuine, and it does.
Yeah.
So that's what this is. Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports, and I'm so excited to finally announce this partnership.
I can't wait.